everybody, and welcome back to our weekly Ascendance of a Bookworm video, and I gotta tell you, this episode was something else, and we are here to talk about episode 7, Seeds of Suspicion. But before we get into things, I do, as always, want to give a big thank you to my boy at Nacho Gashardo for sharing last week's video over on Twitter, and if you too would like to have your name shouted out in next week's Bookworm video, then be sure to share this video around on the internet, and then tag me at JoJo Talks Too Much over on Twitter, and I will be sure to shout your name out in next week's video. Okay, so on that note, we gotta get into this week's episode, which might very well be the most intense episode? Should I say intense? Maybe the most mature? I'm not sure what the word I'm looking for is. The most grown up, I suppose, of the series thus far. We went from this being a show about a girl who just really wanted to get her hands on a dang book to being like a story about a girl and her friend trying to get a company to buy their product, while at the same time also dealing with the backdoor dealings of the nobles and their magic system, because yes, we actually develop a magic system now. And on top of that, you also have the dark undercurrent about what happened to Maine and what the illness is doing to her and why this thing is affecting her. And it's just brilliant. Like this might be my favorite episode of the show thus far. It is so well handled, and the reason why all of this doesn't feel jarring by comparison to previous episodes is because the show really took its time slowly building these darker tones until now we can actually start to kind of dig into them and really take a look at the darker elements of this series. Occasionally, this meant that some episodes felt a little bit slower than others, but I think overall it was only a benefit to the show, because once we got to episodes like this one, it really hit. The characters feel more impactful and important. The world feels much more fleshed out and very, like, I really feel like I have a firm grip on how this universe works. Even when I learn something new that I didn't previously know, it just further fleshes out the world, because we knew that magic existed, otherwise how would mine have gotten here? But now we fully understand how it works because we've gotten like little hints about it, and now we actually get to like see the bigger picture that magic does exist, but it's mainly from nobles, not always, and that's when you get situations like the devouring, as we see with Mine, and it was just brilliant. But before we really get into it, I want to talk about Lutz and Benno, because I just want to gush about Benno, because Benno is a character who I was worried was going to be like evil or something, but no. Now that we know that Otto is sadly married, while still being an A-tier husbando, I think Benno has all the makings of an up-and-coming S-tier if he plays his cards right, because Benno he to me is probably more of my type, because the way he sort of is just like, yeah, like he's like the fun-loving kind of dude, but at the same time, he can get down to business when he needs to, and I like the way that he conducts business, because he doesn't treat Mine like a kid, because he knows there's something about Mine that's different. So he never treats her like a kid, but he is willing to play ball with her to an extent, but he's still willing to kind of keep an eye out for himself, you know, like with the whole like all-in-one shampoo thing. He does kind of let Mine think that she has the upper hand until later on, where it turns out that he actually had the upper hand when it comes to the contract. And that I thought was actually really clever. Like it's still to Mine's benefit, but also to his financially. And you can see that little, like his whole demeanor is much more different. Like he feels like the kind of person where once you get to know him, he opens up a little bit and you really get an idea of who he is, because you don't really get a great impression of him at first glance. And we do see that in the show. Like when we first meet Benno, he's a very different character to how we see here. Not so much very different, you still get the hint of who he is when he was introduced last week, but it's just a little bit different because you actually get to see him in a more calm and relaxed state. And he's a good businessman who still has a decent sense of humor, and he does genuinely seem to care about Mine and Lutz, and I gotta give him credit. I really didn't know that we were going to get that out of this character. And it's through Benno that we actually start to sort of unravel how magic works in this world in the first place. It seems like a very sort of subdued magic system. It doesn't seem like people are launching explosions out of their staffs or anything. it seems to be sort of like very low magic. And I like a low magic setting because when magic does show up, it feels more vital and it feels more like, whoa, magic, oh man, that's cool. Like it feels like it has a little bit more impact. And because Benno points out only nobles have it, this means Benno has some level of mana, so he can actually perform some level of magic. And it's because of that that he's the one who sort of figures out what's going on with Mine, but we'll get into that a little bit more later. Firstly, I want to point out that it's because of Benno, by accident, that we get possibly the biggest shock moment, because don't get me wrong, I think this episode had 3 major quote-unquote shock moments, and the first one is definitely the magic system, because getting to actually see that it is real and fleshed out, we see it with the magic contract or whatever they called it, like the I can't remember what it was, get the magic ready for the contract. So it's basically a way that I believe the nobles can't weasel their way out of it because they're magically like compelled to hold up this deal. So that's actually really damn important when you think about it too, and I have a feeling that will come back into play later on. And it does sort of like the fact that Benno is magic means he's a little bit more privy like to certain information, especially in regards to the devouring. But because him and Mine are able to compete in this business conversation, which should have been a lunch date, because Lutz was just expecting it to be lunch, the poor guy. And it's because of this though that we get the second big moment, and that's the one that I really want to talk about, because this is the one that kind of shocked me, and it actually left me like like jaw on the floor, like no way. And that's the moment where they're walking home, and you could tell something's up with Lutz. You don't super know, but something's wrong because he's walking like a little bit ahead of Mine, and he would never do that. And he turns around and he says, "Are you really mine?" And my heart stopped for like a solid 5 seconds. Like that blew my mind, because I never really considered the fact that, like, yeah, if you knew Mine, the fact that she's suddenly able to keep up with businessmen in a conversation about like sales and the future and like future dealings and stuff like that, like she shouldn't have been able to know what she knew. And while Benno maybe doesn't know that, Lutz does. So for Lutz, he just turns to her and says like, "Are you really mine?" And that moment I was like, he knows. And I didn't know how to take it, because this is a character who we've grown so attached to. But if he, like, because on one hand I'm like, you should tell him the truth. He deserves to know the truth. But at the same time, if you do tell Lutz the truth, that could have some serious ramifications on not only Mine's plan, but the whole story and Mine's whole world, essentially. Like, everything that we have known would shatter, because you don't know how Lutz would react. I mean, like, light novel fans probably do, but we don't. This is big, right? Because this moment to me was a serious indication that, like, yes, Mine, or the Mine that Lutz knew, the whole episode to me, like, at this point, it's not even subtext. I really think it's like overtext at this point, that the Mine that Lutz knew is definitely dead. The devouring absolutely killed that Mine, and our Mine took over, like, for sure. I really just can't imagine it being any other way, which is really heartbreaking, because you knew that Lutz like absolutely had the biggest crush on Mine and cared for her so much. So for him to put the pieces together at a young age too, like, that's a clever kid. But for him to put the pieces together, you know that had to hurt him on some level. And saying it out loud was probably just like the moment where like that reaffirmed it to him that, like, yeah, that's not my Mine. And this comes up again twice during the episode. So it came up during that scene. It comes up again later when Mine says, like, "I thought maybe you hated me or something." And there's like this pause before he says anything. And he's like, "Nah, I don't hate you, come on." But I was like, I don't know if I really buy that. Like, for a second, I was like, there's something there, you know? Like, there's some sort of, like, you are not my Mine. Like, I think he really does feel that, and he's not sure what to make of it, because he's just a boy, you know. He's just a kid. Poor Lutz, having to deal with a lot right now. So it's that moment, but also towards the end of the episode, the last line of the episode is Mine saying, "And when I look back on it, that's the day that Lutz stopped calling me mine." And that was like, okay, not only does he know, but I feel like there's some level of resentment, you know? Like, I feel like something, I don't know, but like that's really dark and upsetting and sad, and it's so well handled. Like I said, like, don't get me wrong, the episode, it has issues, right? It certainly has little moments where I'm like, oh, I wish they had done this differently, or like, I like the magic, right? Like, I wish we could have seen something a little bit more magical during like the magic contract signing instead of just like the ink glowing. Like, I get that it's a low level magic or like a low magic setting, and I did just say that I liked it, but you gotta have a little bit of panache to it, you know? Like, you could have done a little bit something more. And I guess the only other issue, like the only other real issue I have is that Benno's new outfit, I wasn't a big fan of, because I was trying to be like, well, what do the colors say about him as a person? But it's just sort of like a stock fantasy kind of like outfit, and honestly it doesn't really fit Benno as a character, if I'm totally honest. I wasn't a big fan of his outfit in this week's episode, but that's neither here nor there, because the rest of the episode is, like I said, it's probably my favorite, like, of the entire series thus far, because this felt like everything we knew was flipped, and it's something that we have known was gonna happen. Like, we knew this flip was coming, that like just by the vibe the show gave off, like, you knew at some point things were gonna get real, and in this episode they did. It didn't, like, it hit the fan, but it got real. And even like the scene of Benno and Otto discussing the devouring towards the end of the episode, it just felt so like, again, like I said this at the beginning of the episode, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. It's not really intense, it's not really mature. I can only really say like grown up. Like, I'm not too sure what the word I'm looking for is, if I'm completely honest. But the whole vibe this episode gave off was just different to what we've known, but it never felt jarring. And like the talk at the end between Benno and Otto, it's just like it kind of gave me chills, because it's like, yeah, like it's it's Benno explaining to Otto that while yes, nobles have mana, like commoners can get mana as well, but usually they're not capable of handling it and they die. And the reason we haven't heard about this is because usually they die before their baptism, since it tends to eat them up at a young age. So the only reason that most people haven't heard about the devouring is because it's not really reported. They just die young, so, and then the doctors don't know what happened, or like the whatever doesn't know what happened. And it's scary. Like, or at least it would be scary if we didn't already know that mine's gonna be just fine. But if we didn't know that, I would start to get a little bit concerned, because we're at what, episode 7, so we're reaching the end of this first core. I'm not sure how many episodes the show has. Maybe it has 24, maybe it just has 12, I don't know. But it feels like we're kind of reaching this impasse, like something's gonna happen. I don't know when, and I don't know what, but I feel like there's gonna be a big dramatic episode. And I don't know, like I said, I don't know when it's coming, and I don't know what it's gonna be, but I can feel it, and this episode was like the first sign that something's going to happen. On that note, everybody, I am going to give this episode a very, very strong rank of A. This is absolutely a solid A tier episode for Ascendance of a Bookworm, and like I said, probably my favorite episode of the show thus far. And on that note, everybody, that's going to wrap up today's video, but before we take off, I want to give a big shout out to the good folks over on Patreon, namely those in the Earl Grey tier: Calvin Atkinson, Crowbar of Irony, Dominic, Urza, Genkotaku, No For Nothing, Maria Teresa, Mirth Mouser, Omner Garamond, Cell, Shadow Creative, Sipco Games, Somastan, Steven, Tristan, Verdon, and Westbourne Eastbred. A huge thank you to those of you who support the channel over on Patreon, and if you too would like to join the T Squadron, then be sure to check out that first link in the description to check out our Patreon page, see all the cool rewards you can get over there, as well as access to our Patreon exclusive Discord. Thanks once again for checking out today's video, everybody. If you enjoyed it, then you've probably been on the internet long enough to know what to do already, so I ain't gonna tell you, but I will say that it is appreciated. And if you are feeling stressed out today, then you go have yourself a warm cup of tea, and I will talk to you all again real soon.